this is open for your feedback, of course, and I'd like to get your feedback here and wrap it up and start the process.
Thank you, Michael. Go ahead, Brandy.
So I was looking at the timeline, and I know that when we initially were talking about using a third party, you had gone back to what we had done for Chief Davis and Badge Quest. And I can't remember exactly, but does the timeline from that match up to this 20? Because I was thinking that was more of like a 3 to 4 month process versus like a 6-month process. Or am I am I not remembering that correctly?
No, it was a little over 20 weeks, but it was definitely less than 29, Brandy. And I think one of the reasons this is extended a little bit is, again, I wanted to put that heavy public component in there. Again, I think that's probably that in the candidate screening section is probably where we can condense it without losing any type of integrity of the process. So you are correct in that observation. And I think, again, we'll try to shrink this to that timeline.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Anyone else with any? Go ahead, Steve. I see your hand. Go ahead.
So Michael, well, number one, I think the public component is very important here. So, however you condense it, I think it's important to maintain that integrity and make that as viable a portion of this as possible. To get back to your comment about your concerns about Chief Briggs and the amount of time that he's serving as interim chief without support. So obviously his slot as a lieutenant is open. Lieutenant Bowden retired. So my understanding is we have 2 lieutenant slots that are open as well. And what is your plan for that component?
Well, we did just complete the assessment center, Steve, for the lieutenants. So that's how we decided to do our promotional process, is utilize an outside firm in conjunction with HRD and civil service to, again, run an assessment center. And I believe all 6 sergeants that we currently have participated in that. And once we get the final scores of that, we could move forward with hiring a lieutenant, if that is the direction that we want to go. I will say that Chief Briggs and our primary concern right now is getting bodies on the street. And probably not the best phrase to use when we're talking about policing here, but get people on the street and on patrol. And that's really the primary concern right now. So, it could be a while before we hire a lieutenant, just because we need those people, those sergeants on the road. But that's something that Chief Briggs and I are working out. He's actually developing a pretty thorough plan on how he's going to take care of these staffing needs. And we're going to have to take it from other parts as well. Some of the specializations, we're going to have to pull them and insert them back on shifts.
Right. So at one time, Michael, we did talk about, or you had talked about a deputy chief position. And is that something that you're still considering? Is it still viable? Is it allow you to put more bodies or not more officers on the street?
Well, I think the first part of that question is yes, we did at one point have funding in our budget for a deputy chief. However, when we came to the realization that the likelihood of us getting $25 million from the state for the public safety building was unlikely, we needed to shift some things around. And unfortunately, that funding was then diverted towards the construction of a public safety building. The second point I'd like to make, in just with regards to that, is I don't think we should probably make any decisions on an organizational standpoint or an organizational structure until we have a permanent chief in place. And I would certainly be open to that if that's the decision that the permanent chief would want to go in, if we can afford it. But whether that would result in bodies on the street would be, yet to be seen. You know, if we have to take one of those patrol slots to create one of those deputy chief positions, it's just you're gonna have a net negative effect there. You wouldn't have a positive, I would say.
Good. Thank you, Michael.
You're welcome.
Michael, with respect to that, to piggyback Steve's comments and questions, how many offices is the department currently down? How many vacancies or slots that need to be filled with those that left on retirement or transfers?
So I believe we have 4, Joe. We just recently went through the civil service process to hire some patrol officers. We did have 4 potential candidates. Unfortunately, we were only able to move forward with 2. And so as you know, they have to go through the academy. They have to go through, field operations training. So it's going to be several months before they're actually going to be helping us in the staffing level. The other thing is we also have a couple of people out on medical issues, and hopefully they'll be able to return sooner rather than later as well.
Okay.
But I will say one of the things that would be really beneficial for us would be the ability to attract lateral candidates. That way you don't have to go through the process of sending them through the academy. They're already trained, they already have experience. We have advertised for them unsuccessfully, but Chief Briggs in conjunction with Lisa and HR, we are looking at ways that we can make that a little bit more attractive for potential lateral candidates. It's probably what you wanted to know.
Yeah. Michael, is the slow anticipation with respect to lateral transfers, is it because we are a civil service department and not a non-civil service department? Is that detracting people from our candidates from coming to this department?
It's hard to say, Joe, just because we don't, if a person doesn't apply, we don't know who they are to reach out to them and ask them why they don't apply.
Yeah.
I have not received any specific feedback as to why we don't have interest from lateral candidates. I would say it's probably a multitude of factors, but I couldn't say one in particular.
Okay, thanks, Mike. Anyone else? Go ahead, Yolanda, and then Rob.
So Steve asked my question about the issues with the current interim chief, because I want to say we've had other interim chiefs who have been there longer when we did the process for Craig and things like that. But anyway, so it sounds like you're handling it and working with it. And hopefully we'll have at least 1 lieutenant in place soon. I do also support from your chart that we really keep the public input and the public participation in this process. Yeah, I definitely think looking at this, that there are some things that could overlap. And I like your idea of, rather than having to develop an RFP and go out to that process, if there's a way to just bring someone on that we've worked with before and it can work within the correct process for procurement and make this happen sooner rather than later. And yes, I think this is a priority that we determine who our next full-time chief is. So I would support that as well.
Thank you,
That's it.
Yolanda. Rob.
Well, I was just gonna, and I think it got clarified, but we are gonna fill at least 1 lieutenant position meanwhile, right? So that's what we're gonna.
Well, Rob, I think that's yet to be seen. I mean, We'll have candidates that we could promote. Obviously that's something that we would like to do, but all I can say right now is that our priority is making sure that we have patrol shifts covered. To the extent that we can promote someone to lieutenant at this point in time, and continue to keep, patrol as a priority.
Oh, I see. And so when you were talking about lateral, you weren't talking about the lieutenant position.
No, I was talking about patrol officers.
Oh, so you're trying to recruit from others. Oh, no wonder. Yeah. Okay. So that's one thing that occurs to me. You could recruit a lieutenant externally, and then that wouldn't affect your online staffing unless, okay. That's a possibility.
That's a possibility, Rob, but looking at other other concerns, and I would think that if before somebody decided to do a transfer because of the position, I haven't seen that ever happen. It's just a transfer to a department, and then you have positions that are filled internally and not through an external.
All right, so we're assuming that, okay.
Correct. Right.
I do want to make clear that at some point we will hire lieutenants off of our list. And I don't want any of the sergeants who are watching this meeting to be like, oh my gosh, I went through all this. That's not what I'm saying. I'm talking more about the timeline more than anything.
Okay.
Just to explain how it could potentially have a negative impact on patrol. So you promote one of our sergeants to lieutenant, you have to backfill that sergeant with a patrol officer. So now you have one less person on patrol that you would need to fill. So that's part of the jigsaw puzzle that we're trying to assemble and put together. We're creating the bigger picture.
Okay, so basically right now we're down four positions. I say 4 officers per se. And to alleviate some of the stress factors with respect to filling voids during their shifts, I would assume that specialty officers have been removed from some of their positions, and I would assume the school resource officers being some of those officers going back into regular patrol.
That is correct. Our school resource officer and our detectives right now have been brought back into patrol for the time being.
For the time being. Okay. Thank you. Any additional questions or comments with respect to the, I know we segued a little bit into other matters, into the police chief's search and the procedure that we look to follow. We good with that?
I guess my only question is, so your next step, Michael, is to start this process and get this moving forward as quickly as possible?
Well, just taking the input from the board here tonight is very, very important. It sounds like you're supportive of the overall process here. I think it sounds like you're supportive of some of the ideas that I've had to compress the timeline. I have heard loud and clear that one of the most important parts, if not the most important part of this whole process, is going to be the community input. So I just need to find a way to shrink this a bit without sacrificing these things that are priority.
And I would add to that, Michael, that community input is extremely important, but I would think 1A would also be the officer's input that person is going to be taking control of, and making sure that we hear from those who work for the current department as we speak.
So, and Brandy, to answer your question directly, I hope to start this within the next couple of weeks. That's my goal.
So I'll ask the board, do we need to take a vote to give Michael the authority to continue the process that he's already started, or that we just want to give him the understanding that he has our support in the process that he's already committed to and presented to us this evening?
Yeah, I don't see a need for a vote. I
Okay.
think we've discussed this, and
Fine.
he
Yeah.
knows what we want, and
Okay, so we're all good with that. I just don't want it to, okay.
Yeah.
All right, Michael.
Good luck, Michael.
Yeah.
yes, and
Thank you,
thank
Michael.
you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right. Discuss a date for a board retreat. I know you have all your calendars right in front of you.
Are we thinking, what are we thinking? Is this a Saturday morning, Wednesday night? What are we thinking?
I know that a lot of people right now, we've got a lot of things going on, and we're moving up into town meeting time and getting things ready budgetarily wise and stuff. So I don't know, is a weekend work better for you, or is a weeknight? To me, it doesn't make much difference for me, but I'll ask the board members for your opinion on this.
Could I ask a preliminary question?
Sure.
Sure, Michael.
Into schedule. So what are we going to try to accomplish
Yeah.
at this retreat? Where are we going to be investing our time in
Okay.
this?
Can I interject, Joe, at this point?
Sure.
That was my question as well. And my thoughts were, we're going to be compiling information about the use of the ARPA funds from the public. And that might be a good basis for at least one of the agenda items for a retreat, is to take in this information and then kind of make some, prioritize. I'm sure we're gonna, obviously we're getting in information about sidewalk construction and so on. I'm sure we'd love to do every sidewalk that's being recommended, but we know that's impossible. So, how do we coordinate with Doug Small and DPW and prioritize that and so on? It just seems that might be a good kind of retreat discussion. So my 2 cents.
Okay,
I think that's, I think a retreat's more about strategic goals, or rather than, that's, I mean, I agree that there should be a process for this. I think the sidewalk's getting complicated, but I think that should be a kind of a different vehicle mechanism, whether it's a forum or a public hearing, or, retreats, we tend to, I mean, they're technically public meetings, but we don't usually expect to have a lot of people watching. I think it might really change the retreat to actually be prioritizing projects, I guess. That'd be my thinking about that. I think we should talk about a mechanism about this whole ARPA funding, but I don't think a retreat's for that purpose.
well, it could be part of it, Rob. It doesn't have to be the whole retreat, just based
Part of it,
on
we
that.
could certainly talk about the process. I think that's appropriate, but as to actual deciding, I don't know. That's just my 2 cents on that one.
We got
But, to go to Michael's question, excuse me, about, what are the kinds of issues? I think reviewing our priority projects, looking at strategic goals, just kind of reviewing things like that. That would be my take on why we should meet. And I don't know, are we talking about September, or?
I was thinking early October, to be very honest with you,
Okay,
to make it a little bit more easier, because if we were going to consider some of the opera discussions, that would give us time to be
Yeah.
able to collect information. The other subject that I wanted to bring up with respect to the select board retreat was town manager objectives and goals. And we haven't done that in a while. Don't
That's a good
anybody
one.
speak up too quickly.
No, that's a good one. I think
I
you're
think that
right.
is a good one.
Well, so I appreciate that, and I think it's important. I just, we have set a lot of goals, and I mean, one of the things we don't want to do, and this is common, and I can be just as guilty of this as anybody else, is to constantly have a moving target in regards to goals, and establish goals, and then 3, 4, 6 months later, we're kind of halfway through them, and then say, oh, okay, we're going to shift gears here, and we're going to do something else, or this is going to be a priority. And I'm speaking of it in a very black and white type of framework, but there is a real impact on the organization with that as well, and just thought process, I think. So if we want to review the progress that we're making on our priority projects, and talk about some of the other things that we have taken on, and maybe look towards the future and say, okay, what else is on the horizon? I think that's what you're talking. Is that?
Well, it's
That's
time
what
up loose
that's
ends.
what I would be talking about, right?
Right,
Looking at what we're working on, where we're at, and are some, and Michael, you and I talked about this back in the spring when we worked on your review, is that are there some things that if they got put a little more in the forefront, they could get completed, so they'd get completely off your plate, right? Versus, I would not look to put anything new on your plate in regards to a goal and objective, because I think your plate is pretty full at this point.
And Yolanda, I couldn't disagree with you anymore. That I agree with you 100%. And that's the other thing that I feel is important to have this retreat, is to tie up the loose ends, see where we're headed, and what can and where do we go next. And like you said, prioritize the projects that are already in process. And if we need to put more time into a specific project more than another, then leapfrog that project ahead of others, so that way we can get it accomplished and get it off the table, than adding new stuff on. And I'll be the first one to agree with you. I think, when things were going great, we bit off more than we could chew, and we're gagging on it right now. And we need to make sure that we take small bites and swallow and enjoy what we're doing and not make it become a headache. That's why I request the retreat.
So do you have, does anyone have a potential date that you'd like to throw out that we could look at, or?
Well, I'd like early October, to be very honest with you, and I was thinking the second weekend in October. Because there's really not a whole heck of a lot going on.
That's a holiday weekend.
It is it's the Labor, it's
That's the
Columbus Day weekend.
Indigenous People Day
And the
weekend.
marathon.
That's the 11th, isn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Saturday,
so-
then, well, but it's a holiday weekend, right? So some
Right.
people might be
Right,
busy
no,
on
but
the
I mean-
Saturday and,
Right,
Well, we have October
Monday
2nd, though, that's all I'm saying.
Monday.
and
the
we have
11th.
the marathon that weekend too.
Monday.
So we could do the first weekend in October.
I can't do that one, unfortunately. And
Can't
Jen,
do that,
can you do
okay.
that? Jen, can you do that? You can't either?
I can do that one.
Okay, you tell me, just come up with dates that are available that are close, some in October. And if it doesn't have to be a weekend, I was thinking a weekend just to make it easier for others, because we've got a lot of other things that are going on, but
Right.
if you folks are going away, I mean, kudos to you. I know I'm home, so doesn't mean you all have to stay home.
We can take you with us, Joe.
No, that's quite all right. Thank you.
So we're going with Saturday morning then sometime. Is that pretty well?
If it works out for others, yes, Rob, if we could. But if it becomes,
Yeah, I could do either. So Saturday morning's fine with me, but I could consider a weeknight. But, whatever.
Okay,
Yeah, I'm flexible, the same as Joe. Whatever works.
Would it be beneficial to send out like one of those
A doodle poll.
Yeah.
I almost said doodly app. I'm glad I didn't, except I just
That's howdy doody.
howdy,
Sure.
yeah, a howdy doody app. Got a few of
Sounds
those.
good.
And maybe that'll help us find some time. You thinking 2 to 3 hours?
yeah,
It
I
could
don't
be-
think
it could
any,
be less if you want, but
it could be less, but if it's just gonna be just to see where we're at and tying up loose ends, 2 hours should do it. I mean, if it's.
I sort of like Steve's idea about including the sort of discussion of the information that we get from the public process for ARPA.
Yeah.
Just to refine it, not to have a full detailed discussion, but to sort of say, okay, this is what we got. And then any decisions or any decisions would come to an open meeting.
Right,
But I like the idea of, sort of taking a first
Right.
pass at the information that we get.
and looking at it face value, yeah.
And
Does that
that's
fit with the timeline? Does
You-
that fit, does that October fit with the timeline for the funding or?
well, it does fit for the funding. When we last talked about the ARPA process or the public process,
Or it might not be done yet.
we were going to keep it open for 30 days.
Yeah.
to provide comments. So let me
That's
go.
getting close. I mean, that's really,
Well, we're starting to get comments already. So,
Yeah.
I think, as Yolanda just mentioned, I mean, to have that initial conversation, I mean, clearly, we're not going to prioritize, and I'll use sidewalks again as an example, without having interaction with Doug and his staff here. And,
Yeah.
so just to kind of review all of the requests, that could be a 15-minute conversation, really.
well, I was going to talk about, or I thought we were going to discuss about the ARPA funding process at that moment in the agenda, about how we proceed on that. But so we could talk about it now. I just,
I thought we talked about it at our last meeting.
We did, yeah.
well, I'm thinking, but, well, I didn't get the impression that, so what, I had asked for some sort of analysis to help us decide on these. So, it's not clear to me what that process is. Did we decide we're just going to take comments and then we're going to sit at a meeting and make decisions? Is that?
Well, what we had talked about was, first of all, utilizing like maybe a survey instrument that we could help. And that way it helps people understand, I think, what these funds can and can't be used for, because we're going to get a lot of suggestions on how we can use this money,
Yeah.
some of which we just can't entertain. And I think it would be very, very important if we could get that information out on the front end. So, for example, some people might say, hey, we need to use this to reduce property taxes. Well, that's an explicit thing that you cannot use it for, or put it into the stabilization fund. So the thought was utilize a survey, public information kind of package. And then that would also have the opportunity for people to leave general comments and have that collated and put that together after that 30-day period. And then we could have a chance to review it and see what kind of feedback we get.
So depending on that timing, Michael, depending on when the survey gets out and then a 30-day period, a meeting on either the 16th or the 23rd of October would give us enough time to get the information out, get the survey out, get the information back, and at least have it compiled a little bit, I would think. And then we can, talk about it there. And then at our next full meeting, we could talk about it and start that process again.
Because I think if we're going to be talking about like priority projects and what's coming down the line, I think that the feedback that we get on the ARPA funding will really inform that, because we had talked about some line items on, infrastructure and things like that, but it's, we'll have to see where the public kind of weighs in on some of this stuff too. So,
Right. That makes sense.
Well, I guess so, but I'm still, what's our analysis and our evaluation process on these? Like, we're starting to see all these sidewalk ideas, for example. Are we going to have, like Steve mentioned, some kind of feedback, some kind of evaluation or list? Joe mentioned there was a list. I mean, how are we going to, I would think there'd be certain criteria we could apply and, things like that. I guess I'm just.
And Rob, not to cut you off, but that feedback would also come from the DPW and what.
Yeah.
And
Well, that's what I
and
guess
what
I'm
it's gonna-
wondering about as part of the
Right.
process.
Right.
And how we make these decisions again, various, and then, how much is available? Are we reviewing Michael's list as well? And, what are the funding amounts?
Well, I think that'll all come into play once the survey is sent out and we receive response from that. And I think that, and I have to agree with Yolanda and Steve with respect to if we do it on the 23rd of October, that gives us more than enough time to collect the information and compile a list of things that need to be done. It's not just sidewalks. There were other
Oh, yeah.
requests that were suggested as well. Do I dare even mention the Upper Childs Trail being one of them? But I don't want to take any wind out of your sails, so.
I also
Well-
think, to your point, Rob, between now and so Michael has given us his first pass,
Right.
and that's going to be made available to the public. Michael has talked about a survey going out to the public. I would think that while that information is going out there, we could say, okay, how do we want to use this information? To your point, what is our evaluation process going to be once we get this information in? And maybe that's something, as this is going on, we can, give suggestions to Michael or give some ideas to Michael, and then we can finalize that at the retreat on the, if we decide to do it on the 16th or the 23rd. And then we can give that, let the public know, based on your feedback and based on our evaluation, this is what we're seeing, and make sure we, and get response back based on the information we've gotten. Right. But your evaluation process that you're talking about can be refined as we get the information in.
Okay, as long as we're, on a road to doing that.
Yeah, Rob, I think
So?
any concerns, I think it will be a process. So,
Yeah.
and it will be something tangible is not the right word, but it's something that we can point to is something that we've used to help guide our decision making on this. The exact form of what that looks like right now, we don't have. I think to Yolanda's point, that's something that we could develop in concert with the public input process. But I just want to allay any concerns to think that, it's something that we're just going to pull out of thin air, right? And say, hey, we're not going to do that.
What are your thoughts about the survey? Or is that something that we will create internally? Or is that something that, you know, that you're looking for outside resources for?
No, we'll do that internally. I think based on the guidance from the board from our last meeting, on what we've already talked about and presented, I think that'll give us a nice framework from which to use. And again, I think we'll do that in-house, Brandy, and find a way to collate that. There's plenty of, I think, resources that are free and fairly simple to use. And I would say we would use something like that, like a Survey Monkey.
So I guess my next question would be to all of you, are we looking at the 16th or the 23rd, which would be more amenable for all of you to be able to attend the retreat at that point?
Well, I thought we're doing a doodle poll, but this, I think the 16th is okay, or I think either one of them are okay.
Yeah, why don't I look at our schedules here, and I send out a doodle poll. It might be beneficial to even have Doug at this meeting. You know,
I
just
don't
At least for
disagree.
part of it, if we could.
Right,
not
at least part.
necessarily just for sidewalks, but
Yep.
a lot of what we're talking about would have an impact on his
Mhm.
department.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd like to, check.
Okay, all right. So at least be prepared for the 2 dates that we're looking at would be the 16th or the 23rd, which would be more amiable for all of you to attend. For me, it doesn't matter either day. Either day's fine by me. I just thought the weekend would be easier. We could spend more time and not rush through things, and then have to worry about folks having to get to work the following day with a clear mind. At least Sunday you can have a scattered brain without, and then relax the rest of the afternoon.
Recuperate.
Recuperate from it. Yeah, absolutely.
7:30, Joe? 6:30 we'll start in the morning? Just kidding.
You know what? I'm up at
You'd probably
3:30.
say
So
yes,
if
yeah.
you want to join me at 3:30, be my guest.
At
No.
7:30.
Okay.
You don't
Not
want
if you
to,
want it to be productive.
you don't want to see me at 6:30 in the morning on a Saturday.
Well,
Yeah,
yeah.
right.
Okay, ladies. How about 8 o'clock? Would 8 o'clock be a good start time?
I thought we were going
Let Michael do a
It's a
doodle
doodle
poll,
poll, yeah,
and
we
then
gotta go
we'll,
back to the
at our
poll,
next
but-
meeting, we'll be able to talk about what the date is.
That's fine, but
That
I can
way.
see Mike putting the time in at 8 to 8:30, and then
I mean, we've started other times at 8, so
We
if
have.
that's,
we
so
have.
let him put the doodle poll out for the dates, and then
Okay.
people can get back to him.
All right, sounds good. We all good with that?
Yes.
Okay, thank you all. Okay, next on the old new business is to review the response for an open meeting law complaint filed by Mr. Morgan dated August 25th, 2021, and that had to do with the letter that was sent to the planning board. And this was reviewed by Mr. Morgan on August 24th. And you had the opportunity to read the open meeting law violation, and you've had the opportunity to read the town's response from town council. So at this stage, I'll turn it over to Michael if there's any additional information that you may want to add to it. The response and the answer to his open meeting law is pretty clear and pretty concise. So unless you guys have questions, I would I'll leave it for comment.
Just to explain how, we got to this point. There was an initial draft done of our response. And today, Chairman Yanni and I met with town council and discussed this a little bit further. And based on that discussion, we had some revisions to it. So hopefully everybody has had a chance to look at the revised one, but I would agree with you, it's pretty self-explanatory.
And Michael, that's the one that was in the final packet that Sue sent us today? Was
Yes.
that revised? Great.
Yeah.
Very good.
Well,
So-
I,
Yeah.
I thought that the language in it was it wasn't very straightforward. If we have a story to tell about how the letter went out, we should just say what it is. I mean, I didn't,
What,
I didn't think the wording was all that effective myself. It doesn't really. I mean, do you guys, and it doesn't talk about Lori Tosti at all, who was also part of the complaint. So it doesn't address what she did in terms of if she did talk to the school committee or was passed by them. I think we'd want to state it if that
Well,
didn't happen, or we'd also need some sort of explanation there.
Well, I think, Rob, that the response does talk about the fact that it was sent by the school committee chair to the planning board. Now, he has the opportunity to also place a complaint against the school committee for an open meeting law violation, which he
Well, I
did.
think he might have. I thought he mentioned it.
I don't know if he did or didn't, but he certainly has that opportunity to do so. I mean, I think, it was kind of interesting reading his complaint, because his complaint, says some things that indicate that he clearly, to me, had not watched our meeting and had not seen the discussion that we had relative to this letter, and actually to what he calls the fifth select board member and his position or so on, because you did certainly speak to it at the meeting. And
Yes.
Right. So
Yeah, right.
it's really kind of almost a knee-jerk open meeting law violation in that sense. So I guess at the bottom line, I'm perfectly fine with this response. I think it's unfortunate that we have to spend money on this, but I'm okay with this.
Okay. Brandy or Yolanda, any?
Yeah, I mean, I think the response is appropriate. I think we're admitting that, Joe did send it to us, but then we proceeded to discuss it in our meeting. And
it was the night of.
and then, so
I guess
think it's an
the other thing,
appropriate
and I'm not gonna,
response.
I mean, I think the other thing is it doesn't really, so the complaint wasn't about the fact that you could discuss a letter at a meeting. The complaint is intimating or saying that the letter was discussed outside of the meeting, and
but it
I'm not
wasn't
sure this
discussed,
response, what?
but it wasn't discussed outside.
I
of
know,
the
that's
meeting.
my point. I think this letter is kind of convoluted. It doesn't just state that.
Do
It's
we
just
know-
hard to it's just saying that we discussed it at the meeting. I mean, there's no story from, I don't know, it's just, to me, the language is kind of convoluted and doesn't really seem to explain what happened, but I don't know.
Do we know if the school committee had this on their agenda and discussed it, or what their process was?
That's a very good question, Brandy. So when we got the initial OML complaint form, it's a little bit confusing because in one section it names the Ashland Select Board and School Board, but then when it talks about just the line
Specific
above,
people.
specifically, it just talks about the 4 out of 5 members of the Select Board as shown.
Well, yeah, and I think like I said, I think that's a good point, because the school committee is part of this. It's just in terms of a response, it doesn't really address that part of it. And maybe we don't feel it needs to, but I think it's kind of
The open meeting law
Yeah.
complaint to us is addressed to us and not dealing with what the school committee did. With respect to their actions, that's going to be separate. These are
Right.
the actions that were taken by our board, by myself and the board, and prior,
Well,
before the meeting.
okay, I mean, if that's what Adam thinks, I guess, but I'm reading the complaint and he mentions the school committee as well. So, and this response does not say anything about the school committee. That's all.
And I would think they would have to have a discussion and they would have to give their response. This is our response as the select board, as the 4 members that he is citing as having been part of it.
Okay, if that's the
So,
interpretation.
That's my
fine, but-
interpretation.
Yeah.
It says.
Yeah, I would think at the attorney general, though, they're saying, well, this is the town of Ashland's response. What's the deal with the school committee?
Well, it says perhaps, his complaint actually says perhaps the
Okay.
school committee. So, again, for me, this is kind of a typical knee-jerk open meeting law violation from this particular resident. And it's as if he really didn't put a whole lot of thought into this when he wrote up his violation form. That's the way I interpret his verbiage. And, so I think, again, I'm perfectly fine with the way this is constructed. I think it gives kind of the broad strokes of what happened. I think we discussed it in open meeting, and we proceeded accordingly. So,
The only thing that I have a concern about is that Lori doesn't sign it chair of the school committee. She signs it on behalf of the school committee. So I think that I hear what you're saying, Steve, because I completely agree with you, but I think it isn't a complete response. Given that, I think that we probably do need to put something in there because this is the town of Ashland's response. That's
The
my
town of Ashland, Brandy, I would say that it's the town of Ashland's response to Mr. Morgan's open meeting law violation to the Board of Selectmen. Because again, we didn't have a unanimous decision or acceptance of the letter. The school board apparently did, because if they didn't, I'm sure they would have done the same thing and have addressed it individually by those people who did support it. We did not have that support, unanimous support, so I didn't think it was right to put the entire board of select board on there, knowing full well I didn't have the
Sure.
Full support. But those that did support it, their names were on it. And I think if for me to do it the other way, then that would be a total obstruction of the facts to that. And then I could see there being a problem.
I agree with you, Joe. I think that that's absolutely right. I think that was the thing to do. I do think that the actual open meeting law complaint is against both the select board and the school committee. So I just think that we need to have town council's opinion on how that should be addressed.
Or actually, in my opinion, the school committee needs their counsel to address it for their board, because, they have different counsel.
Again, I think it's very, very confusing the way the actual complaint is written, in that, on one hand, it says the Ashland Select Board and School Board, and then just in the next, the specific people who violated the open meeting law, the only members that are talked about are the 4 or 5 members. Of
Right. He doesn't even cite Lori as the specific person to have done it.
It's confusing.
Like-
I think to Brandy's point, it is confusing, but I can certainly go back and get some more clarification from town council.
So I would think that if we're gonna have a vote that has to then have the school committee's information, we'd have to have some kind of joint meeting with them.
Well,
Right.
not necessarily.
Whereas we did not have a joint meeting with the school committee to discuss this. This was Joe and Lori must have run it by her school committee, because it says on behalf of the school committee. And then when Joe brought it to us, I mean, I'm with Steve that I support the response here, because this is our select board, our review of what happened, and our response.
yeah, we can't really speculate on what transpired with Lori and the school committee. I would say, the reason why she signed it on behalf of the school committee is that there probably would have been the need for one of the members to recuse themselves from signing this particular communication. So
Right.
I don't know. We can't speculate on the school committee and all of their any discussion they had openly or any other communication. So again, I agree with Joe here. This is strictly a select board issue, and that's how we should.
I agree as well.
Approach it.
If there are no further comments or discussions with respect to this,
I move that we accept the response to the open meeting law complaint filed by Steve Morgan on August 24th, 2021, as presented in our packet.
is there a second?
Second,
There is a second. I will do a voice vote, please.
Greaves, aye.
Mitchell, I.
Brandy and Rob.
I'm thinking.
Okay.
I think I'd prefer to abstain from this.
Okay.
Just because I don't have I think the process was okay. It was a little problematic, but I don't think it was an open meeting law violation. But I don't like this response, so I'm going to abstain from this.
Okay,
I'll vote yes, just because I feel that we did not, I feel it was appropriate for our actions on this.
if you have any reservations, Brandy, please, vote your conscience. Don't,
I would prefer to have some
I
would,
don't want us to have to spend any more time on this, Brandy, not to interrupt you, but there's other more important things for us and to have staff do. But sorry, I shouldn't have interrupted your vote, but
I'm going to vote no on this. I think that I think you probably have enough votes to move it forward, but I vote no.
no or an abstention.
No on this letter.
Okay. And I'm gonna vote yes. So it's 3, 1, and 1. 3 yes, 1 no, and 1 abstained. So that does pass. So that letter will go as written.
That's a first.
Yeah.
It is a first, and that's okay.
Yeah, that's
Nothing wrong with that.
the way it works.
I just heard the reservation in your voice, Brandy. Now you gotta do your conscious, kid.
Right.
That's where I am, so.
I completely agree with the philosophy behind it. I would, well, we talked about it, so it's good.
Okay,
we don't all have to agree, and that's
No.
fine, right? That's
It-
the whole process here.
right. We can agree to
So-
disagree, but in all sense, we all agree that what was done appropriately and not inappropriately. If the language of our response doesn't meet your standards, that's fine. That's fine. But I do have to agree with Yolanda. We need to move on because we have other things that are going on in this town that need our attention more than someone who
I do
has-
note it. I don't think it was an open meeting law violation. I don't think it was done. I think there would have been better ways of doing this. That's-
Right. Okay, well, thank you all. Let's go to our next agenda item. And it is priority projects update. And I will turn this over to Town Manager, Mr. Herbert, to discuss the Rail Transit District and all the new developments that are happening with that project.
Well, where to start? So as the board's aware, the Zoning Board of Appeals voted and issued the comprehensive permit for UGC to do the age-restricted development up on the Rail Transit District site. That was ultimately appealed by the landowner, Mr. Gaynor. And we had received notice that that was going to happen, and we were formally served today with that appeal. So, that process, we're not necessarily, in this type of situation, the board will at some point need to make a discussion or have a discussion about what to do, whether to support this appeal or support the defense of this appeal. What we have typically done in this type of situation is we have supported the appeal in concept, but the developer has basically been the responsible party for carrying this through the appeal process and the costs. So we will have an executive session at our next meeting to discuss that. One of the things that I was very, very concerned about was if this appeal would prohibit us from adding those units onto our affordable housing inventory, because these appeals could take a while, and Attorney Mead thinks that it will not stop us from being able to put those on the affordable housing inventory, but she did want to check.
Hey, Michael, quick question. What is the basis for Gaynor's appeal?
So the central point of his appeal is that UGC did not follow the purchase and sale. And because UGC went through a 40B process as opposed to going through a zoning change at town meeting, it invalidated the purchase and sale. And so therefore, the applicant did not have site control and therefore had no right to hear it. And the ZBA had no right to hear it. I will say that there is other litigation involved to this between the same two parties, but UGC is also litigating the fact that Mr. Gaynor has not performed in accordance with the contract or with the PNS that they have. So that litigation is involved as well. What Attorney Mead thinks will happen is that both of those cases will be somehow pushed together or compiled, and it will be heard that way.
Michael, do you see this as a suit, countersuit, that UGC, filed something against Gaynor first, and now this is his,
No,
wants back?
to give you my very honest opinion, I think this is about money. I think Mr. Gaynor feels that what UGC is paying is not enough. And, he's looking for different ways to basically renegotiate the purchase price. I think that's about as
Okay,
make it.
thank you.
And then I don't think we have any updates on the Trolley Brook Trail. Jen, I would look to you if you've got any more information on that.
Well, the pedestrian bridge was delivered today. We're working to get that installed, and then they'll continue through that process as planned. So still, I think they're still on track despite obviously there's been a ton of rain that they've been slowing them down a bit, but they're still looking at, October-ish to have that complete.
Good. So the timetable to that, Jen, hasn't really been, pushed back because of the rain?
No, I mean, I think they've lost days here and there, but it's on, they had a little extra time in their schedule. Yeah, so they're
Okay,
good.
cool, thank you.
Mhm.
All right, Michael, you're still on.
Okay, we're moving on to.
I'm sorry, Jen, before we go, we were, Joel, we were talking about a bunch of questions that Joel had. Are we still on track to try to meet and kind of resolve that, Mike and Jen? I don't know. He
Yeah,
had a
no,
variety of questions. Some of them are related to this, I think, but.
yeah, I think we were looking at tomorrow initially.
Oh.
So it was, so I think we were looking at tomorrow at like 11:30, and we're just waiting to see if you can meet, and if not, we can look at a time next week, because I think Joel had included you.
Yeah,
assume
I
to
was kind of
attend.
interested in being involved. I'll be working tomorrow, but I mean, maybe you guys should meet anyway, and I'm fine either way. It's just probably good to get that done, and at least we can move on from whatever the issues were. And I could, next week is good for me if people want to wait, but they don't have to. I won't be available tomorrow. It's budget season, so.
Okay.
Okay,
I'm sure.
I can move on to
Yep.
downtown.
Go right ahead, sir.
So at downtown, if you have not noticed, there has been a lot more detours around Main Street. So we still have Main and Myrtle open to one-way traffic heading northbound. And then heading southbound, people will still avoid Myrtle Street going down Ray Marquetti and onto Concord and onto Front if that's how they decide to go. One of the things that's a little bit different is that we're also closing Pleasant Street to work in this area. Actually, part of the undergrounding process impacts Pleasant Street as well. So including inserting one of the vaults or a couple of the vaults, and then also some line work there. So there's some detours around the Tilton, Cherry Park and Summer Street area as well. And we anticipate those to last until the end of this week. That's about my update on that. Anything else? Anybody have any questions?
No.
Okay. All right.
Public safety in Mendez.
So with the public safety building, we're still continuing. As anybody who's driven by has seen, steel continues to be erected there. We've been working a lot on stormwater mitigation and stormwater plans. Many thanks to Jen for working with our contractors on that and the Conservation Commission. It looks like we're going to be looking to do a beam signing ceremony in the near future, which is a little bit of a variation on basically a groundbreaking ceremony. Unfortunately, Joe did not agree to walk along the top of the beam by himself.
No, not without a net.
We'll have to find some other entertainment.
When are you looking to do that, Michael? Any idea on the date?
The 8th or 10th, we haven't formalized the date yet on that. We'll get that from Mr. Nagel. He'll have more of a finalized.
That'd be great to film and get on.
Yeah. As soon as we find out, we'll shoot a note off to you, Yolanda, and Barbara as well.
Perfect. Thank you.
That'd be a good thing. Again, a lot of work's been going into stormwater mitigation, so we're all a little bit anxious about tonight and seeing how that works, including the rain train.
Does Jen want to comment on that? Yeah, she's shaking her head vehemently.
No, Jen.
Okay.
Not going to comment on it. She's going to put her head down and just do the work.
Well, Jen has done a tremendous amount of work. I mean, just the rest of the board to know, a tremendous amount of work on all aspects of the building, but specifically the stormwater, and it's been a challenge given the number of storms, the volume of water, and it's been she's been in contact. Now I know she was on vacation over the past week or so and just in communication with people constantly. So give her a tremendous amount of credit for just keeping this process going.
Absolutely.
Yep. We have.
Okay. So that, anybody wanted to add anything on public safety? If not, I'll move to Mendez.
One other item, Michael, just to add, is there's a new structure that's on the site. People have driven by over the last few days, and it's a rectangular vertical structure that's up against the fence along the street. That's called a construction mock-up. And that is where they're going to put samples of the exterior of the public safety building to do, ultimately to get final approval for the materials that are being used on the exterior of the building. So at some point, there'll be samples up there. Any idea, Jen, when that'll be?
So I think in the next, it'll obviously be weather dependent. So I think it should be in the next few days. I know they have all the samples. So.
Great, good. Thank you.
Okay. Moving along to Mendez. So the planning board continued their hearing on the Mendez project last Thursday. A lot of good discussion, I think, at the meeting. I thought it was very robust. They covered a lot of bases. It looks like the planning board is coming to consensus around a decision on some of the aspects that have been more in question or more controversial, including the tree and the grave. And so I can't say for sure. I do not know if they're planning on voting on at the next meeting on the decision, but it looks like that was the direction they were heading in. They talked about some of the conditions in the decision. In the meantime, we've had a resident reach out to a number of state agencies to inquire about whether we have followed the correct processes. And so we're dealing with that kind of on the back end, if you will, and just providing information to those agencies, having phone calls and providing clarification. A lot of this stuff was provided before, but we're just reviewing it again. So that's a lot of work that's happening that's not necessarily visible. So, and just to say, you know, those agencies include Mass Historical Commission, the MIPA office, as well as the MSBA. I think DCR has been involved in a little bit, but it continues. So.
Yeah, the only thing one thing I'll say, it's, we should look back, when I commented at the planning board meeting, it was, we should try to get some, understand what, we had a very good process, but things kind of, we had some issues at the end, and I think it's worthwhile to kind of review what happened with an eye to handling something like this better without this kind of, I guess, negative kind of things that happened. I'd like to encourage people to, have some creative problem solving and try to, move together for a solution. I think that's, I don't want to get, I'm not doing this to get people in a big discussion about it, but, I think, some things did go wrong, and it wasn't like the best outcome. And, that's unfortunate. We maybe could have done better there, I think. So I'll leave it at that. Okay.
Well, everyone has a right to their, to their thoughts and opinions, and you're right. And we'll leave it at that. So, Michael, is there anything else you want to add to that, or we'll just wait and see for the next planning board meeting, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I will keep the board and everybody updated on any material discussions that happen with some of those state agencies and the impact. Unfortunately, we have seen some impact here at the local level with one of our local historical commission members resigning just based on some of the.
What was that? Yeah, I do want to talk to her if I get a chance. I don't know. Is there anything you could say publicly about what that was about, or?
I'll let Ms. Childress speak
Okay.
on that.
Understood.
She certainly shared with me some reasons, but I think it would be better to get it from the horse's mouth.
Rob, I did have conversation with Liz, and she was concerned about a lot of different things. But after the conversation and talking with other people, she called me back and she said that she had a change of mind.
Oh,
she didn't know how to deal with a specific individual, and I told her that's a learning curve. And
good for her. Well, that's good news.
Yeah, so she's gonna rescind her letter, even though she hasn't drafted one to the to Tara's office. So she's gonna stay on board. She's gonna continue.
Right.
Good.
That's good.
So moving on to 126, there's a couple of things I want to point out on this. First of all, we're having a really hard time filling details, especially with the work that Eversource is doing. And as they move closer to that intersection with Elliott Street and 126, they desperately need police officers and not necessarily flagmen for that. And so
So I would say, Michael, I drive through that intersection. I drove through it Monday. I drove through it today at 7:15. The detail people, the flagmen, are doing an awesome job. They know what they're doing. They're getting people to move. They're paying attention. So I think if we can keep them, they know what they're doing.
So we don't hire them.
Okay.
Yolanda, I wouldn't necessarily disagree with that. That concern and request for officers as opposed to flagmen is actually coming from Northern Construction, the actual construction company doing the work, and not necessarily us. But definitely noted. I have been impressed with the flagmen as I've gone.
And women.
Flagmen and women. Thank you very much. But I've been in parts of the country where we use flag
all the
men
time.
time.
That's
Yeah.
all they
I didn't
use.
know we could do it. Is that a change?
It's just they don't have enough manpower, Rob.
Oh,
Yeah,
I see. So if you can't get a
It's
police
actually a
officer, you can
collective
use flag
bargaining
people.
agreement,
Oh,
but
that's
because there's no manpower.
Oh,
you
I
know,
see.
you do
Okay.
what you have to do.
so at any one time, we probably have 10 details on 126 at least. We have at least 2, and that's minimum downtown. We have the public safety building sometimes requires a number of details. Mendez is going to require some details during the construction phase. And that doesn't include any of the private jobs that are happening as well. So we've done the best we could to alleviate the pressure on our department. We've allowed firefighters to do details as well. So they've gone through training and they've participated and been part of the detail crew. You've probably seen some of them out on the street. Other officers from other departments are also participating, but it's just a challenge overall.
You know, it's a shame. I probably get myself in trouble that there are a lot of retired officers that have that experience and expertise in doing the things that need to be done, but yet aren't being utilized because of state law. You know, it is a shame. But if you made them specials, that could work because other towns do it. But far be it for me to dictate what to do. So.
Right, and the only other thing that we really have that's pressing on 126 right now is, we've had some water and some flooding issues. Some of them, well, I think a lot of them due to the construction that's happening. So we're dealing with those as well. These are all the little things that actually are big things, kind of flying under the radar, but which take up a lot of time and energy on our part. So just give a little bit of visibility to that. So I'll move on to the Valentine property unless there are any other questions, and don't really have too much of an update there. I will say that we attended the Conservation Commission in support of a request for determination of applicability at the Valentine property to remove invasives, remove some of the brush. So the Conservation Commission approved that. Still waiting on a final memo from the engineer who looked at the Valentine property and looked at the possibility of just doing the roof or the foundation. He's promised us to put that in a report. I said that's very important for us to have. We have there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Sounds good. Any other comments or questions with respect to the Valentine property and or the bond project that is being looked at? Seeing none, let's move on to the town manager's report. And we thank you for those brief reports on the updates. Thank you.
Thank you. We really have covered ARPA, I think, under another agenda item. So for the sake of time, I'll just move on to the next one, which is the update on the rental assistance program. And this is a program that has been administered by Emma Snellings, under Peter and Jen's watchful eye. It's currently being transferred over to Human Services at the time. So we started this program back in July of 2020. And since that time, we've received 55 applications. And of those applications, 43 were actually eligible for assistance. We currently have 3 that are in the assessment phase. And then we had 9 that they weren't eligible, or they just simply did not complete the process. So of those applicants that have received assistance, the total amount of funding that we have delivered is $189,606. So again, that's been distributed or committed to recipients. So 119 of that, so roughly 2/3, I believe it is, went through the CARES Act. So we utilize CARES Act funding from the federal government, not our local funding, to provide that type of assistance. The remaining 70,000 was funded through the Affordable Housing Trust. So we're very grateful that we have that resource as well. Of the 43 who have received assistance, we've got 13 who have received assistance for mortgages, and the average amount is $1,200 per month. And then we've had 30 that have been recipients of rental assistance, and the average there is actually $1,550 a month. So, when this program was conceived and started, we didn't necessarily know what type of demand we would have. It's been a little bit lower than what we had anticipated, but it's certainly been utilized. I'm happy to say it's been utilized. And, I know some people personally who have been a part of this program. I wasn't part of their application process, of course, but they have talked to me afterwards, and they've been very, very grateful to the town for, providing this type of resource to them.
Mm-hmm. Michael, I do have a question. Did you say earlier that this program is going to be transferred under the Human Resources Department?
Human
Services?
Jen, why don't you explain a little?
Yeah, so Joe, I think I actually went to the last housing trust meeting. I think you.
I did not attend.
Yeah, I don't think you were there. So we are moving it over under Jennifer Wolfing, our social worker, and partly that's because, well, there was a sort of, when we thought about it, was sort of a finite program initially, but also as we started to sort of process applications, there's so much coordination between human services that we can probably streamline the process by having them screened through human services and sort of have the same type of process. So Emma's actually working right now with Jennifer and her staff to make sure that the process stays the same, and we have the same review process and the same reporting to the trust. And we'll still have that support for the trust as well.
Okay, my concern was that the trust was going to be taken out of the loop. I just want to make sure that it doesn't happen. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, and honestly, Emma went out a little earlier than expected. And so we had planned out this big transition, and we had, she had memos in draft form for the trust to sort of explain the process, and she went out unexpectedly. So we sort of started the transition while she was out. And so I came to the last meeting, and it was a little bit bumpier than we had, planned out, but such is life, I guess. But
yeah. Okay. No, thank you.
Just a quick kind of shop question. Are you making the checks out payable to the individual or the landlord or the bank?
So it's either to the landlord or the mortgage holder. And then just one difference when we switched over to the trust, CARES Act had a little bit more flexibility in terms of mortgage. So it may be why the numbers are a little lower. So with the trust money, it's only allowed to have deed restricted mortgages. And so it's a little bit more restrictive, but yes, it would go to the mortgage holder for that.
And there's still funds that are available for people that are still in need and want to apply? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Any more questions on that?
Good work.
Again, it's a great program. I can't thank our staff enough, especially Emma, who has really just done a great job at administering this.
And it came up in the news with people with unemployment ending and things like that, and additional unemployment that people, and the eviction moratorium ending, that these kind of programs are very important, even more important.
Yeah.
So.
I do have a question about how it's working with, because if I know Human Services screens for applicants for the Ashland Emergency Fund as well. So I'm curious if, how it's working with both programs, basically.
You mean how the coordination happens?
Yeah. Like, and how much is the Ashland Emergency Fund being utilized, or are they completely helping in different ways?
Yeah, so when we started the project, what we thought, and we worked with the Ashland Emergency Fund, thinking that some of the requests were going to be much more sort of significant, and initially was that we would sort of look at the rental assistance or the mortgage assistance, and then sort of make the connection with the emergency fund, so that if they had utility bills or other things that needed assistance, and we'd be able to work together to sort of help people through the pandemic. And so we continue that coordination. Sometimes if somebody is ineligible for our project, we can certainly, we refer them to either the state or to the emergency fund. So if that's, if there is a possibility of them having to support something like that. So it's constant conversations with all parties involved.
They're like the second to last safety net, Brandy, for those that don't meet the qualifications on for the other funding.
Thank you. It's great to have both. It really is.
It is. It is. So unless anybody has any objections, I'll move on to a discussion about the grants or year-to-date grants, and then updates on some of our other grant programs. So what was provided to you was a very large, I think, detail of all the grants that we've received over time. I really think it's important to highlight this because, you see these grants under consent agenda, and I think sometimes it gets lost how much, I don't want to call it free money, but how much our town utilizes and has been successful in securing outside funding to support our operations and support our initiatives. And so that's one of the reasons I wanted to bring this up. And we typically...
Are you going to share your screen on this, Michael, so everybody can see this? Or
let me try. Okay. Can everybody see this?
there you go.
Oh, good. And yours turned up right, so that's good.
Yes, thank you.
Not the only time people are going to say that. So these are all the grants that we have received since the beginning of the calendar year. And in total, we've received $723,000 or over $723,000 in grants. Now that includes large ones, and I'll cover those first. First is the Shared Street Grant, which is one of the things that we pursued to help close the gap with our downtown funding project, and we were successful with that. And that's $300,000. And then there's the Business Marketing Technical Assistance Grant that we received for $250,000. And just a reminder for everybody, that's a collaboration with the City of Framingham and the town of Natick to provide economic development and marketing support to some of our local businesses by pairing them with local businesses that provide that type of expertise. So we're very, very thankful for Beth in being able to secure that funding and distribute that. We've also received some smaller grants that make a big difference. So our fire department continually gets grants that we, again, don't necessarily receive a lot of fanfare. So, we've received a grant for almost $15,000 for safety equipment. And then we received $12,000 as a supplement, COVID supplement for our assistance to firefighters grant. In the human services element, we have received a couple of grants, one for almost $53,000 for food insecurity, or to alleviate food insecurity, and then $21,000 to help with mental health. Everybody knows, I think by now, the mental health impacts that COVID has had, and certainly that helped us provide resources that our community needed. And the last two, just want to talk about our state 911 grants that we have received. One's a training grant, and one's more for communications. And those were $16,000 and almost $56,000 respectively. Again, big thanks to Ed Berman and Chief Briggs and prior Chief Alfano for working on that and securing those grants. So any questions related to these before I move on to or some previous grants that are certain?
Yeah.
We are still administering.
Yeah, Michael, who typically are the grant writers? So you mentioned Ed, you mentioned Chief Briggs. How about in the fire department, human services? Who typically are the grant writers?
So for the fire department, Chief Roby and Lynn certainly play a role, but Matt Boland has always played a role in our grants, including the big safer
Wow.
grant that we had received. Matt does a great job with that. He does a number of other things. He wears many hats, but he does a lot of grant writing for the fire department. The food security infrastructure grant, more the human services one. Jen, who would you say would probably be the primary writers on that? I don't want to.
Yeah, so I think it's a little bit more of a group effort in the community center, so Candy Wilson does a lot of work. I think Jennifer Wolfing, Kristen French. So I think they work together on those grants.
Great, thank you.
Michael, I'm just confused. Why are the grants on this page as opposed to all the other pages? Like, what's the?
Because I narrowed them down, Rob. So
Yeah,
so the one I'm showing on the screen here, I simply just filtered everything out that wasn't this year.
oh, okay, so this is this year's, okay. So all the others are going back a year or more, is that? Okay.
Exactly. And some of those are still administering, but this page right here that people are seeing on their screen are the grants that we have received so far in calendar year 2021.
Okay.
And it totals.
And Michael, for these grants, are there any sunset dates that these funds dry up, or they continue until the money is completely utilized? Or is it just at the end of the year?
Well, most of them close out at the end of the fiscal year. So in
Okay.
June, we have, I think, a couple, one or two that extend to, I believe, the end of the calendar year in 2021 and into 2022.
Okay, thank you, Mike.
Okay, you're welcome. So again, just want to give kudos to our staff and our
Sure.
team. for putting
Michael,
those-
just in terms of grants administration, if I could ask you kind of a policy question. So, and I glanced at the other long lists, and those go back how long? Are those a couple of years?
They go back, they go back a while, Rob. I mean, there's
Oh,
multiple
okay.
pages there. So
Because one of the things, especially on this policy committee, everything that the state gives out and a lot of it comes through some sort of grant program. And, I guess it would be I guess I wanted to hear from you and Jen about, is there really savings in administration to be had by, just including this stuff into some kind of formula aid, like we do with chapter 70 and chapter 90 or general assistance, because this is like, staff time, getting it, administering it. And it's obviously they want to encourage certain practices, but I would think everybody wants to improve their fire department equipment and things like that. And, you just get the feeling it'd save a lot of time and effort. If this just was included in the general aid as we get another 200,000 or whatever it is, and we can use it as we like in our own internal process, because it just strikes me there's a lot of administration and monitoring and reporting. And I know I have a Shannon grant in the city of Worcester. Ours, that's the anti-gang. We have to send copies of every invoice for every expenditure. It's ridiculous. And I imagine you will have to do the similar thing. So I don't, just a thought, we should be pushing for some kind of change in the way this is done. It seems like every initiative is another defined grant program. They don't just say, well, here's some additional funds. No, it's like, so it's a different way of doing things. And I'm just wondering, that's something we should be pushing on.
yeah, Rob, I can't thank you enough for bringing that up. And, as you said, you've got experience with this. Some people might think of this as free money. It is not. It takes a lot of work on a lot of people's parts to do the reporting necessary and to make sure that everything is following the rules. Brittany Iacopone, our finance director, sometimes cringes when she sees a new
Yeah. Another grant. Yeah. Right.
And Rob, from a policy perspective, it's actually got to the point where before people apply for grants, they need to check off with Brittany before they submit, just to look at the workload and everything. It is.
Ooh, I'm gonna see if I can do that where I work. Boy, that would
Send it to Brittany.
Well, you start a policy where,
Yeah.
if you apply.
sorry. Yeah.
But it is, it's
Yeah.
so much. I mean, even I, spend a lot of time reporting on the MassWorks grants. So I have to do quarterly reports. I have to do year-end reports. I have to provide, invoices. I have to provide pictures sometimes of the work that's being done. So there's a lot of work. And so if you see me or some of our other employees push back a little bit when people bring up grant programs, it's not that we don't want to do it and that we don't see necessarily the benefit of doing it. We're just weighing the costs associated with it versus the benefit.
And
Well,
that
it's something we
cost
should
be-
think about
So,
advocating
we should
for.
definitely push for that as part of a formula type
Yeah.
of program.
Yeah, some an MMA should, I think.
I'm gonna
be
I'm gonna
trying to-
take a slightly different view, right? In that this is a way for people who really want that money, who are willing to put a little extra work in.
Yeah.
And it gives some accountability to where those tax dollars and where that money is going. Right now, I mean, for good or for bad, we get our budget. I mean, think about this ARPA funding that's going out willy-nilly almost. There's going to be no accountability to anybody as to how that money is being funded. Right? There's
I'm not
going
sure
to be
that's
no,
true.
or not much.
No, we have to submit, so we have to submit reports annually.
Okay, so that's a good thing.
Well,
Yeah, I'm just thinking more of in terms of efficiency. I mean, the town administers, I think, its own funds responsibly and the general aid responsibly. It's just, provide guidelines. I think it's just, you don't have to spend so much time applying for and administering. And some cities and towns are
Then
more
we can
able to
we
do
can
it than
decide
others.
not to do it, right? We can decide not to
Yeah.
apply for these grants,
That's
right? Like Michael said, they're putting in a policy here in town that if it's going to take too much time and energy and it's not worth
Yeah.
it, then maybe we won't apply for those grants.
But I think but it's also comes down to efficiency and flexibility,
Yeah.
frankly, and
So-
your local priorities anyway.
So, it's interesting hearing, two distinct sides of this. And, I think it seems like most of the things that we analyze, you've got to do some kind of cost benefit analysis. And, we would depend on Michael and Jen to say, well, the cost of doing this application doesn't measure or is balanced out with the benefits that are accrued. And, so I think that I would hope is part of the analysis here. And obviously you don't apply for every grant that's available because some of them just don't make sense. And some of them just don't meet that criteria.
yeah, it's very rare that we do that, but it has reached that kind of critical level. And I think at a bigger picture, if you'll just indulge me, I think this is a good example of kind of, us taking on a lot of stuff and taking on maybe perhaps too much. And, we have one finance director who also serves a statutory role as a town accountant. And, we have an assistant town accountant who does a lot of the accounts payable stuff, those everyday things that need to happen. But in addition to the initiatives that we talk about, Brittany's also responsible for running a $70 million or being the chief financial officer of a $70 million enterprise and everything that's associated with that. There's some big dollar signs that cross her desk that she is ultimately I'm accountable for it, but she is accountable for it. And just the day-to-day operations is probably enough for two people. We need two people for that, but to take on some of the other things, I think is, I think it just demonstrates the willingness of our staff and commitment to go above and beyond to do things. But
Michael, I agree with you. 25 years ago, when the DEAR program was in its, infant stage and was going strong, I was the grant writer and I was responsible for the taking care of the grant. There was a section of the grant application and it asked, what was the cost to run the program? And that included the grant application in and of itself, in taking care of the grant, keeping records of where the monies were spent and utilized, and giving, quarterly reports, monthly reports, and yearly reports on the grant. That was all included as part of the grant application and the monies that you were, given to. So if it costs the town, say, $500 for the time and effort that it took me to take care of the grant, then that money didn't come out of the PD budget, but it came out of the grant budget. And then again, it would all accounted for, and you had to give the time slips, the whole 9 yards. So, and I'm kind of surprised that that's not something that other grants should be doing as well. To take into consideration how much it actually costs time-wise to utilize these grants and monitor them, throughout the existence of the grant itself. But things change over the years, so who knows?
Joe, just one thing, if you need to report on any of the inventory, I still have the frisbee.
You still have that?
I
Good.
do.
I'm glad you do. Frame it, because we don't acknowledge it anymore. So that's good. Any additional information on the grants or anything update? Thank you for the report on that, Michael. I appreciate that.
So just a question, Michael, because in our packet was a very long report.
Mhm.
Is it possible to get that to us via Excel so we can sort of, look at by year or something like that? Because some of these, it looks interesting, like, it's hard to see, well, when did it actually finish, or how much did we actually get one year, or something like that.
Absolutely. In
Okay.
fact, I was going to suggest, I had it on my screen and saying, oh, you can filter it by, however you want.
Okay.
But you've got a PDF, you can't do that. So
No,
Yeah.
not possible to sort this.
And it's interesting to see like what the change in over time is, like to Rob's point about, everything being sort of a grant application at this
Yeah.
point. If we're seeing a huge trend towards, recent grants versus 10 years ago, I'm curious if like larger communities are handling this by having a dedicated resource
Oh,
to,
they do.
things like that.
Oh yeah, many communities
Have grant writers.
have grant writers and grant managers and
Right.
Does the school have a grant writer, an actual writer, or is that a?
they
They
did have
did
a
at one
part-time for a
time, but I
while,
think
but
they
I
got
don't know if
laid
they
off.
still do.
Yeah.
So they did have one part-time. I'm trying to remember. I believe that was a position included in one of their more recent budgets.
Mm,
I cannot say that for sure.
yeah.
Where can I say if they actually filled that position, if it was?
Yeah. Just curious. I mean, you don't need to, find out. It just, typically, I think there's the schools go for a lot of grants, and I would think, they either have somebody on staff or they've got somebody subcontracting and taking a percentage cut from a grant. I think that's pretty typical as well.
Yeah, and I think, this goes to Rob's point. I think a lot of the school funding that you see is actually formula based. So the grant manager over in the schools might not necessarily be doing as much grant writing as they are doing some of the reporting
Yeah.
grants. Those are very important.
Mhm.
And the last thing related to grants is related to one that we had received last year. And it's a micro enterprise grant. So we applied for that. That was part of the CARES Act that was administered through the state. And so Beth and I were talking last week about some of the new things that's going on with that. So just to remind everyone, we were the lead community of 23 cities and towns that applied for and received this grant, and the total was over $4 million. It was $4.2 million. Each of the communities that were part of the application were allotted $280,000 to provide grants to businesses. And I believe they were limited at $10,000. So we have finally now expended all $280,000 that has been allocated to Ashland, and we'll be getting an update of those businesses soon. But what's happening now is there's still some money that's left over after 8 rounds of promotion on this. And 8 communities have reached their maximum allotment, including Ashland. But The decision has been made to pull the remaining funds left, the money that hasn't been allocated by towns that were, that hasn't been spent by towns that were allocated the $280,000. And that's going to be opening up to all the communities as well. So we'll have the ability to provide more funding, more assistance to businesses, hopefully utilizing the remaining funding.
And Michael, this is businesses, there's restrictions on the number of employees for this grant, right? It's like, I think 5 employees or under. It's small, real small businesses, correct?
Yeah, I think it's changed and it's morphed a little bit as each round has progressed. But Brandy, you're right. There is a limitation on the number of employees, and there's also a limitation on the income. And so that is decided. So I'm looking forward to Beth's report on the community or the businesses in town that's received this funding. And I've heard some positive things from businesses that have received it and how helpful it's been. So kudos to Beth and for administering that and going for this grant.
Any other comments or concerns or questions regarding the grants and the fundings and where it's been utilized and continuing?
Would just say thank you to Michael and his
Yeah.
staff for getting them, administering them, and
Absolutely.
making them and using them to the best of to the best of our advantage for town. So
Yep.
thank you for that.
Absolutely. Okay. We're up to that wonderful time of board reports. And let's see. We'll start with Yolanda.
Oh, okay, great. A couple things. And Rob, I'm sure will have something to add when he talks. 10 to 50 Main Street Subcommittee. We've had another meeting and we discussed some of our next steps. We've asked Michael to reach out, sorry for that, to the developer to work with us on the working group. And then we've also discussed how we can include other committees in this discussion. So we're going to look at reaching out to historical sustainability, conservation, to sort of make sure that when we have the discussion and as we open it to the public, we're first including some of those committees and then bringing it out to the public. And we haven't decided what that next step is or how that step is going to be. And our next meeting is the 13th of September. This past Saturday at the Corner Spot was a great event, the Sip and Shop at the Corner Spot. A huge thank you and congratulations to Beth Reynolds and Ashley and their group for coordinating that. We had quite a number of vendors. There was some great food. I saw Michael there. I saw Brandy there, and lots of other people from town had a great time, and all the women-owned businesses had a very successful event. So that was nice to see. And then the last thing, I was part of the Lions Toll Road that happened on Saturday morning. I was there from about 9 to 11. It was interesting. I mean, they raised a fair amount of money, but the number of people nowadays who you pulled up to them, they said, I don't have any cash. They're not carrying cash on them. So as an organization, we're going to start looking at having a QR code so that if we do an event like that and someone says they don't have cash, we can say, oh, take a picture, go to our website and donate that way. So that's being discussed.
Good idea.
As
That's a
times
great
change,
idea.
you got to change how you do it. I mean, think about it. How many times during COVID, you walked into a restaurant and instead of them handing you a paper menu, you'd go there and you'd go to their website to look at your menu. And a lot of organizations now are finding ways to donate that way. I know the dog park committee is looking at that as well. So
Cool.
And that's it. That's all I have.
Thank you. This is ladies' night. So Brandy, you're next.
Okay. So I don't have very much, but I did want to say, as we kind of approach Labor Day weekend and the unofficial end of summer, I was kind of thinking about this past summer, and I just wanted to give a real thanks to some of the groups and events that have really kind of brought the community back together again, because I think that we've really needed that after this past year and a half. So want to give a huge thank you to the Ashland Farmers Market. It just feels like it's back to normal, and it just feels so good to be there and be a part of it. And the Ashland Day Committee that's been doing the summer concerts, it's been a lot of fun. for the nights that aren't rained out, to be able to be a part of that. And things at the corner spot. It's just been really good. And I just wanted to thank everyone that's been a part of that, because it's just been so good to see people live and in person again and have a reason to come together. So that's all I have. And then just to wish folks who are celebrating Rosh Hashanah next week a happy Rosh Hashanah. And, you know, kids are back in school. So, you know, summer's officially winding down. So thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Brandy. Robert, you're next.
Yeah, I didn't have too much. Thanks, Yolanda, for reporting on 1050 Main. The only thing I would add, and this is something I probably should have known, but Michael reminded us, or the latest version of the developer, he's keeping a substantial amount of the traditional buildings there, as opposed to, I think that's a key and big change. And, you know, I think, you know, we're hopefully heading into a good process here where we'll have a positive outcome. So, other than that, I don't have anything else to add. So thank you all.
Thank you, Rob, and thank you for always being there, being one that has things to deal with. So we appreciate everything that you do for us all. And for Brandy and Yolanda, the same in return. Stephen, last but not least.
Actually, you're last. But
I'm last.
Right? So thanks, Joe. So just a couple things. Tomorrow is the first Ashland Lions senior breakfast of the year. It's actually the first one in like a year and a half.
Oh, boy.
It's going to be great to get back together. I think we had, as last count, I think there were 50 people on the list for breakfast. So that's a pretty good crowd. Hopefully the weather doesn't impact that dramatically tomorrow. So looking forward to that. Just to also reiterate, the Dragonfly Festival is scheduled for September the 18th, 1 p.m. to 5 p.m. at the Ashland Historical Society and at the Corner Spot. I did want to, something that's been on my radar for quite a while, I think I've probably mentioned it in past meetings, but I was looking at the last open space and recreation report. The last one that was provided to the state and to the community dates back to 2010. There was a draft report that was published in 2007. And then in 2015, there was a forum, if you recall, a forum at the library for an updated open space and recreation plan. And given all the changes that have occurred in this community since 2010 and all the activities, all the projects, it would seem imperative, that might be too strong a word, to have an updated plan. And, you know, looking at the draft, you know, it just seems so many things have changed. If you have a chance, review the 2010 plan. I think we need to expect that the Open Space and Recreation Committee complete this process. The last thing I recall hearing was that it was at the state getting reviewed, but that was maybe 3 or 4 years ago. Now, I know the state is not the quickest entity in the world, but you know, I find it hard to believe that we haven't received a reply. So I would ask our chair to reach out to the chair of Open Space and Recreation and find out when the community can expect either a draft or some additional input or a forum so that we could get this thing completed and really updated to reflect who we are today as a community.
So Joe, and if you don't mind, I actually ran into Roberta, I don't know, a month or two ago, and I asked her that question. I said, what's going on? And the response I was given was there was some information that the state was requiring to get some last approvals. But I agree with you. Let's have Joe.
Happy to reach out. Not a problem.
If we could, I think it's important. And I think there's you know, different situations that are occurring now. And I'll, you know, just to throw in the whole Valentine property is new, didn't exist in 2010. So here we are 10 years later. So I'm not going to belabor it. So
Yeah. Steve, can I just ask you something? So is the report on the town website, the 2010?
you know, Michael forwarded to me. I'm not sure. I struggled to find it. So I asked Michael, he sent it to me. It's not listed under Open Space and Recreation Committee under their portion. So again, it was challenging to locate it.
Well, if that's the case, Rob, then your next question is, when can we get a copy of that letter? That report? So Michael.
Well,
if you
it should be available
forward that to us, that
somewhere.
would be
Yeah,
great.
I mean, I can forward it. I have it here.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Forward it
Thanks.
to
Okay.
everybody. That's not a
Yeah.
problem, but it should
And I
be,
think, yeah,
should be on their page. It should be actually their primary work as an entity is this report.
I'd be happy to reach out. Not a
and
problem.
I just want to second, this is, in terms of, as time goes by, we're approaching build out, the idea of saving open space. What remains, we should, continue to keep that as a priority and
Sure.
and have an inventory of places that we're interested in. And, some of those, the Upper Charles Trail, there's some parcels on that as well, but there's also, of course, general open space, and this is a key time, both in terms of funding and the necessity. So
Yeah.
thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah. So that's, again, I'm not going to belabor that anymore. And
I did. So
that's fine. The last thing I did wanted to acknowledge that the 20th anniversary of September 11th is coming up. I was in New York City the last couple of days and was able to visit the memorial. And, it's interesting. The city is really not very busy right now, because of all of the COVID environment. But the one place that was busy was the memorial. And, it's, so I just wanted to acknowledge, folks to think about September 11th and the 20th anniversary. So
I don't take any more wins out of my, I've written something with respect to that. and that's
okay,
how we'll-
all right. So I'll leave it at that. So thanks, Joe.
Thank you. Appreciate that. And I will definitely reach out to Roberta and see exactly what's happening, maybe invite her to a future meeting to see exactly where that committee stands and what's going on with them. So
Thank
I'd be happy to do that. Before we adjourn tonight, Yom Kippur is on the 15th. And I know Brandy brought it up. And that would have been a night for our regular select board meeting. So I'm thinking about changing that to the 22nd. I did talk to some of you about the 29th, but there are some people that cannot make the 29th. We also have an executive session that needs to be slated for that meeting. So I would entertain September 22nd at 6 o'clock.
I can't do the 22nd. I have another meeting that night.
Okay,
Sorry.
okay. All right, so we definitely need everybody there for that. So why don't you all get back to me? I don't need to do.
You have some suggested dates?
We could
Well,
do a
if-
howdy doody.
Howdy doody poll.
Howdy doody poll.
Yeah, no. If you get your calendars in front of you right now, tell me what's available. And we can do that right now.
Joe,
We definitely,
I'm flexible, so,
so am I. So
All
that, and we have 3 working members that need to,
Yeah, do we have to do a Wednesday or?
no, we don't. No, we don't. That's why I'm
Yeah.
asking, which would be,
I can do Tuesday, the 21st. I don't know what, the other thing is we got to look at the meeting room and what other people are doing and,
you don't need to know what, well, we had Zoom, so.
oh, that's
we can-
true. We
it's
just
Zoom,
have to
so we don't
check with,
worry about Meeting rooms.
Mike's thinking there. He's like got some issues. I think.
No, I'm just looking to see if I have another
Yeah, right.
municipal meeting. that
Well, we
night.
do have a public safety building meeting in the afternoon.
Right.
I have the evening of the 21st and the evening of the 28th.
I can
Yeah.
do more.
I'm clear on the 21st.
21st.
I am clear as well.
Okay, well, just waiting to hear on Brandy. She's,
I'm good for either the 21st or the 28th.
All right, 21st it is at 6 PM.
Okay.
Okay, great.
Yep.
Thank you for giving me the extra time to do that. I had the opportunity, honor and privilege of representing the Select Board at an Eagle Scout ceremony. It was a dual ceremony for the O'Brien brothers, Owen and Javier. They did a great job with their projects. I guess one of them was involved in maintaining and clearing out a lot of the unwanted weeds up at the Valentine property, and it took quite a bit of effort to get that work done. So I'm glad to see that's going to be followed up with additional work up there and getting that invasive weeds away from there. I'd also like to thank Liz Childress and Donna Mignani for running the snack shack at the pavilion this summer. Though it was an abbreviated summer, they kept everything open and clean, and for everyone's edification, it was great. And I would also like to thank Michael Duca, who was our coordinator for the abbreviated summer concert program that we had this year. Hopefully, we'll be back in a full slate next year with the Lions food truck. I'd like to thank Beth Reynolds for getting refreshing concessions at the summer contest this year, and hopefully we can do them again next year with the Lions. Be a nice added feature, and hopefully the rain will not be a detriment as it was this year. But then again, it's Ashland Day, so you expect rain to happen. And with the projected weather forecast, looks like Labor Day weekend is going to be pretty good. And potential cookouts. So if you're looking to have corn on the cob for your cookouts this year, please give Bill Gath a call. We ran out of corn last Labor Day weekend, and people were a little annoyed because they went down to Lucky Farms to find no corn. So if you could give us a heads up, Bill will be happy to add additional corn and orders for us. And he asked me to provide a number, so I'll give you the number. And all this money that we generate goes to the town's annual Halloween parade and party, along with the holiday lighting to make it bigger and better.
Joe, I thought you were going to invite us over.
Well, I could do that. I could do that.
Where you were going with that? I was
You're gonna husk corn too while you're while you're at it.
used to do it a
So-
lot as a kid.
The number that you need to call if you want to reserve corn, so you'll have it for your holiday outing, is 508-989-0181. Again, that's 989-0181 to place your order for the holiday weekend. And I'd like to wish my loving and beautiful wife Donna a very happy anniversary. It's coming up next Saturday. If my mama was around, I'll just look up to the heavens and say, "Ma, I told you it would last." It's been 40 years, so we're going to keep it going. And lastly, I'd like to, I have something that I've written with respect to 9/11, because it is the 20th anniversary of this event. And I would just like, if you just give me your indulgence for a few minutes. 10 days from tonight, 20 years ago, on September 11th, the United States became a victim of the deadliest terrorist attack in our nation's history. A seemingly normal morning was transferred into a state of chaos when 4 flights hijacked by terrorists, flights 11 and 175 out of Boston Logan Airport, flew directly into the Twin Towers in New York. Flight 77 crashed into the Pentagon, while Flight 93, originating from Newark, New Jersey, heading to San Francisco, was forced to change its course and was headed towards our nation's capital. The death toll exceeding over 3,000 has left a devastating impact to the tens of thousands of families and friends across our nation. As the years have passed, it seems some Americans have forgotten those horrific images that were broadcasted live, all on news networks, that day and the preceding days and weeks following the attack. The residents of Ashland, I being one of them, will never forget the sacrifices made by all those responding emergency personnel who lost their lives trying to rescue those trapped in the Twin Towers. Nor will we ever forget the heroic souls on Flight 93 out of New Jersey who foiled the terrorist attack by overtaking the hijackers on downing their own flight in a desolated field in Pennsylvania, potentially saving many other American lives on the imminent attack on our nation's Capitol building. Though the anniversary was 20 years ago, it is our responsibility as Americans, citizens, to take time out of our Saturday on September 11th to reflect and give silent prayer to all those who lost their lives on this tragic day. This evening, we, the Select Board, ask all of you who are watching and listening via Zoom, assembled here and in your homes, to honor those souls in a moment of silence and a moment of remembrance. Thank you. And with that, I will ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved and very well said, Joe. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll second and well articulated, Joe. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe.
Thank you very much. It's a shame that we have to do that, but we will never forget, ever. So we have a motion. It's been seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Bye.
Aye. Good night, everybody. Happy Labor Day to everybody.
Have a wonderful weekend.
Yes, have a great weekend, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Take care.
Bye.
God bless.